Hello and welcome to Conversations in Close Protection with your hosts Chuck Randall and Chris Story. Our goal is to engage the greater protection community, inspire innovative thought, and as always, continue the conversation around all things close protection.
This is Conversations in Close Protection, October Shop Talk. My name is Chuck Randolph, across the digital divide, the fount of security. Monsieur Chris Story, sir, good afternoon.
The fount. That sounds, I don't even know what to say. First off, I'm just like, I don't know what to say because, and I'm also excited at the same time. Like, it's been so long, like we've been so busy. It's been so long since we've sat down. I've actually seen you more in person than we've recorded over the past couple
Which is
weeks.
crazy because we've seen each other more in person, but we have been working, so we haven't been able to record.
Yes.
Dude, today I exercised my right as an American and voted.
Did you really?
Yep.
What's that window? Because ours isn't until a couple weeks from now.
Early voting here in Texas. So there, in Central Texas, apparently has one of the largest concentrations of veterans in the U.S. And they do a pretty good job of bringing everyone out. In fact, there's a place called Patriots Hall that's being built by what's the actor's name? Kyle Sandler.
Never heard of her. Awesome that's happening, but I've never.
Yeah, and his wife. He's an actor. You'd know him if you saw him. You go like, oh, that guy.
Right on.
He was in like Friday Night Lights in like I think a couple others, but one of those guys always kind of plays a action hero or a tough guy. But actually met he and his wife one day at a local place that serves margaritas and talked about this Patriot Hall. It's awesome place for veterans. So the missus and I went down and exercised the early vote. Felt good, but I can't remember. I was telling her I can't remember the last time I actually physically went to vote, like instead of like a mail ballot.
Right. So. Interesting. Okay.
And you guys start next week or what?
Yeah, next week. And I think, I always try to go in there, whatever reason. Just makes me feel like I'm part of my community, I guess,
Yeah, no, it's good. I always feel good doing it. But yeah, dude, it's been a hot minute since we've actually got behind the mics. In fact, this will probably be the most up-to-date shop talk we've done in a while since it'll hit the presses today.
Yes, I agree. Real time, which is awesome. God.
See what I did there?
Yeah, I did.
Make it stop.
Pretty much. Dad jokes.
Stop. What have you been up to, man? Other than like you and me driving hours so that we could link up and have some conversations. No pun intended.
Yeah, just a lot of operations, a lot of planning, a lot of consulting pieces, and then of course, planning for the conference. All that's coming together. I think
that's definitely we're in the third quarter for that for sure, and that's all ramping up and it's exciting. I think definitely we'll carve out some time at the end of this one to talk about all the stuff coming on. What I think you're the guy that titled it Close Protection Week, and all the stuff going on there.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna put it on a T-shirt because it's freaking awesome.
You're gonna put it on a piece of bread, toast it, and then have it as a sandwich.
Pretty much. Wow, so awkward. God bless. How do you do that? I don't understand, man. Oh, geez. Right on.
We could just be those guys in the podcast. We only talk about this, and then we did that thing. Raw.
Dude.
And it's also Friday, man.
Might I suggest decaf, my friend?
What is this thing that you call decaf?
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of coffee, very cool things coming with the IPSB and some specialty coffie. So we'll maybe leave that spoiler free or something, I guess.
No, I think we should, so I think it's a cool idea, and I think it's to promote at least what we would think is a very cool project that you came up with, which was the Protectors Fund, and it was kind of a last minute thing last year, and it was, I think you had really the reason you had done it was because it was very, very timely with that officer who had been killed in Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
And you had, you had a response to that, which I thought was fantastic. For whatever reason, it didn't maybe, grab legs. And so I think this place we could, this is an opportunity for us to do things for not only what the IPSB was designed to do, which is to support people within the industry. And this is for like whether it's for the fallen or scholarships for their kids or just, scholarships for new practitioners. I mean, I think, I think it makes sense. I mean, here's the deal. At the end of the day, if Keith Ortiz can do a personal scholarship for somebody, right? Definitely the IPSB can freaking, can do that as well.
Yeah, actually, I was on the phone with Christian West after that incident, and we were talking about like we really need to create some type of fund where we can help people out. I mean, like we said before, if you're Navy SEAL or special operations community or law enforcement community or former Fed or something, your family is going to have a lot, or you have a lot of resources around you. Whereas, in this industry, we really don't. And we did want to create something where we could, as you say, like, hey, maybe, somebody needs a little help because they've been injured in the line of duty, so to speak, or, we're trying to give some students the ability to come to the conference or just do something to give back to the community in a way that says, hey, we're here to support you. And look, our community at the IPSB is amazing. There's no membership dues or anything. We've raised money for people to do some amazing things. So I'm looking forward to this and this special project that you came up with around the conference, which is, are we allowed to say it?
Yeah.
The Protectors Fund Special Blend Coffee, which will be on sale at the and it's being done in conjunction with a former protector himself. Who now owns a coffee shop in Colorado. So I'm pretty excited about it. And the logo and the packaging looks really cool. I'm excited.
Yeah, so it'll be pretty cool. So the Protectors Blend coffee is going to be, we'll have it at the conference, but all of the proceeds will go to the Protectors Fund. So that'll be awesome, right? So everything, I mean, there's, obviously we're a nonprofit, so anything that we make over and above the cost of the bag of coffee goes right into the Protectors Fund, and then we'll in the partnership is with Mountain Air Roasters, and so once we do that, I think we do a couple batches, and then folks will be able to, if you like it or whatever the case is, you can do a subscription through them, and they'll mail it right to your house, and again, any of those proceeds come to the Protectors Fund, after
we've already been talking at
awesome.
work of getting a subscription once it gets off the ground, so we make sure that we're going to be a Protectors Fund or Protectors Blend shop over here in Austin. So I'm excited. It's and it's great to see these types. I mean, look, I love the conference. This idea of this podcast was born from one of the conferences, but all the other things that we have going on, like, the Lessons Learned Committee and the initiative that's going to bring forward, and some other things we have around some joint white papers and additional webinars. I mean, it's going to be an exciting year for the IPSB. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of changes, and I think one of the freaking fantastic things about it is that we've translated ideas into action, right? So like the idea, the thing that's going to be a little bit different about the lessons learned piece is you started this with lessons learned, sitting down and talking to somebody about their involvement in a lesson, and so and we had looked at doing the committee, I think, for a while, but now it's just going to be like a repository, a joint repository of incidents that have had impact on the protective community, and have either done one of two things: has been a foundational lesson learned or a conditional lesson learned. And the reason that we separate those two is because we don't want to get them conflated, right? We don't want to do
Right.
an everything based off of a condition. We want to do an everything based off a foundation, and then understand that these conditions might impact, or these conditions and variables might impact an operation that you need to be aware of. So
Yep.
it's pretty exciting because I think most of us know those basic or foundational, for a very, very long time, nothing changed in the protective industry until somebody got hurt. And so as we start talking about these things and sharing these lessons learned, I think it'll be a great opportunity for a couple things. Number one, for everybody to have access to them, right?
Mhm.
Number two, people to get involved, people in the community get involved to, where something resonates with them, where they can write something up and then have it, really to be peer reviewed, if you will, and then published, or at least held in a repository on the IPSB website and
Yep.
other websites. And I think it should be a pretty fantastic initiative. And then at the Close
Yep.
Protection Conference, we'll just kind of review some of them in person and kind of kick it off from there. It's going to be fun.
It's cool to see the evolution of that, and especially this idea of like this allows people to get involved. Like, and we're not talking about like the guy should have been standing to the right 5 inches and he wouldn't have, that kind of stuff. You save that for social media and Instagram weirdos.
Yes.
Like you said, we're talking about these are foundational things that we need to consider. Whether it's protective intel, surveillance, whether it's something in planning or something that we can have a thoughtful look about. Like maybe the Abe assassination or something, and we can say, hey, here we go. And it's published and we start keeping, like you said, a repository of this information we can go to. And I also think it creates some really cool, interesting second and third orders of effect in terms of like, if a student wanted to get involved, like maybe I'm studying history or, I have a special project at school.
Right.
I could work with, this is a nonprofit. I can work with this nonprofit to do some of these studies. And so I don't know. I love it. I love the people involved. I won't spoil any of that. We can reveal that at the conference, but the idea now people can really get involved in something meaningful as opposed to just like some flame war online.
Right. Yeah. It'll be the big reveal, if you will.
Let's, speaking of reveals, let's reveal some news. We've got a lot of stuff going on. As always, my friend, it's hard to pick from the swath of or deluge of information, since it was raining here earlier, that we're getting, but we always try to pick 4 or 5 things that are topical and we think are interesting to the audience as well.
Right.
Right off the bat, Haiti, we continue to track that. We said we would. We could argue whether governments are moving slow or they're just trying to let it fix itself. But we did see, I think just this week, Canada's Foreign Minister, Justin Trudeau, met with our U.S. Secretary of State Blinken Thursday, and they were talking about international armed intervention in Haiti. Blinken said something to the effect of like more likely needs to be done there to help the national police restore, I think he said, their grip on security. Now, Chris, for us, I think is really interesting. We keep talking about this. You and I exchange texts about it all the time, and we're talking to folks in our groups and stuff. What do you think the likelihood at some point this manifests itself into opportunities in the contractor community?
I think it really comes down. So yes, I think it'll happen. I would say, and interestingly enough, I think there were some opportunities in the space 15 years ago, right?
Where I know several folks that
just diverted,
Well, wasn't it back in the day? Wasn't it Steel Foundation that had one of the major
Foundation? So Steel had it for a very long time, and then they were looking to transition it to somebody else, and then it just kind of went away. So I think there's opportunities. I think that, unfortunately, Haiti is and always has been kind of a dumpster fire. Just a challenging environment to work in. Not necessarily a war zone per se, but I think there might be some opportunities for some folks to get involved. Really what it comes down to is 2 things. what government involvement from a government official perspective, and then
Mm-hmm.
what commercial interest can be born of it, right? Those are the two things
Mm-hmm.
that are gonna fund, and then of course what's the risk environment in place at the time. So it could be, or it could be like a little bit of a going back to what high risk was, before Iraq and Afghanistan, which would be, Haiti and freaking, Bosnia,
That's what I
which,
think.
in
I
hindsight weren't really high risk, right? Or
No,
high threat.
I don't think we'll see the air quotes here running and gunning that we saw in Iraq, but I do think we'll go back to the high risk activity that we saw before. We don't have a crystal ball. I think about I think something else in a couple of the articles I read about this. Trudeau and Blinken were talking about what it might look like. They're also been talking about varieties of countries to gauge interest and willingness to put some type of coalition together.
Hmm.
You know, I don't think everyone should pack your bag and get ready to go to Haiti tomorrow. But I think if you're someone in that space, this is definitely something you want to watch, and then maybe start gauging some of the regular characters and regular players to say, what are you seeing on the horizon? I was going to call around and ask some folks, given that we're the timeliness of our recording, I didn't have time this morning to do that, but if somebody knows, please let us know, reach out to us and let us know if you have any skinny on it.
Well, I think that's going to be the driver as well, right? Which is the what does it run essentially? Like what are the
Yeah.
rates? What are they looking for? All of that is going to determine, because everybody wants to run and gun, but maybe that'll be the, back in the day, and that'll be something that everybody looks down on. Like, yeah, you didn't actually run and gun because it was Haiti, but at the end of the day, it is another
Yeah,
hot spot.
yeah. I mean, in some ways, I guess historically, when you look back on it, it's all relative. One would say, I think
Yes.
Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm not saying anything against anyone that spent time in Haiti. I guess every hot spot can be hot on the spot for somebody, but I totally understand what you're saying there. But again, I don't think we'll see. Knock on wood. I don't think we're going to see a return to that 14 years of warfighter where we had opportunities right and left and companies popping up right and left to secure a contract.
Yeah, I mean, well, it definitely won't look like that. It
Yeah.
might look like it might look different in terms of like, hey, so we have the military, and then we're gonna have PMCs, and because we need to freaking, like, you know,
Trainers,
execute,
maybe.
train
Yep.
up, execute, and then I think that the next, to be honest with you, that whole next phase is gonna look completely different. I think we'll probably have, PMCs that are executing, offensive operations and some
Yeah.
other things as well.
We could have, we might also see like maybe asset protection. We have to move some resources in and out. Maybe that's through some type of defense contractor or something.
I agree.
Again, I'm just pontificating on opportunities, but definitely a space to keep watching and something that we'll keep watching too. Look, it's a shit show. Crime is pretty rampant. Gangs are pretty rampant. There's been some protests against some of the U.S. backed. I think the current prime minister, what's his name, Ariel Henry. He's a U.S. backed individual. Apparently, there's been some protests in the street, but I think there'd be protests in the street regardless of who's in there. If your community was, kind of rapidly, well, it's beyond destabilized. It's, we're in a point where they need to get it sorted out for the people there as well.
Right. It'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah.
As is our industry.
Yep.
As is
And,
our industry.
opportunities are there. I don't, and I'm sure this is stuff that'll be talked about at the conference too, when inside rooms or over a coffee or a beer or something, but these are good questions to ask the folks at the conference when you see them. Next thing that we found was, something else we've been following, the after effects of the assassination of Shinzo Abe back in July. And the latest thing that's come out is there's a probe going on right now from the Japanese government into the Abe's, he was connected to that church. I think now it's called the church. I wrote it down, so let me make sure I got it right. It used to be called the Unification Church. And now it's called the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification. These are folks, Chris, you remember that back in the day, we're doing things like mass weddings and other such things. And when you go back, I mean, there's a great article in the Wall Street Journal, and you go back and the young man who committed the assassination, Tetsuya Yamagami, apparently his mom had given a lot of money to the church. He started looking at it as taking it very personally. And at one point he wrote, "Mark my words, revenge has meaning only when you carry it out yourself." I mean, these are all things that he had put out. These are things that were on the airwaves, so to speak. And he said he was going to take revenge on the church because it ruined his family and deserved to be exposed before the whole world. And he said, another quote I found, that he said that it's strange how desperately I want a gun.
Yeah,
and he figured out how to make one.
It's freaking pretty crazy, right?
Well, and these things are, I think the thing about this is, it's all out there. It becomes, as we've talked about many times in the show, I mean, intelligence, data is the analyst problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's all out there and you have to probe for it and you have to look for it. I mean, obviously, Shinzo Abe, former PM of Japan, would have some type of protective detail around him. We know that protective detail also got some type of probe. I haven't seen anything that's come out from it. I don't know that we will. Right. I mean, what does this mean? If that's a former diplomat, well, what does that mean, for me, who's at a small organization or
right.
working for a high net worth family?
Right. Well, what was that a couple of years ago where the protector was the assassin, right? Like one of the guys that was on the protective detail was a Russian.
Yeah.
That's one that's one that we're going to look at for the lessons learned piece. But yeah. So, I mean, look, it just, the insider threat piece becomes a thing. Obviously, this wasn't an insider piece, but it is very, very interesting. And I think it just kind of brought that back to me, like.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're in the risk atmospherics monitoring business at some level. I mean, these are things that how does one if it's just me, Chris, and it's me and a couple other folks, and we have a small team, and maybe we're taking care of some local politicians or something, we don't have a large budget. I mean, how does one set up a monitoring function around these folks? I mean, is it just TweetDeck and some keyword searches?
I mean, it can be on its lowest level, right? TweetDeck, Google alerts, and you try to figure it out. But I think at its base function, it has to be the risk assessment always. Yep. And then it's that you got to look at what emotional response. Funny, I just was writing this out today. Is what emotional response does your principal draw from other people, which gives you your threat vectors. What environments or domains are they in, which gives you your, again, associated threat vectors, et cetera. There's also, but again, it's off the risk assessment, and then of course, then you're going to be able to put in those keywords into your whatever platforms you're using, and you want those to be able to. You want them to work for you, not to have to go do that every time or every place. So it's challenging to find the right spot. I mean, we were reviewing a case this morning, like Ferdinand, and you have to understand the second and third order effects of what an attack on your principal might affect.
Yep. And I think you're right. It all does start with that risk assessment too. I mean, and anybody can do that. And to go into any operation having not done some type of rudimentary risk assessment, I think, in my opinion, is gross negligence almost, because you really have no idea what you're looking for. Yeah, but Chris, Chuck, I mean, it's right there. These guys are going to come up and they're going to eat. You don't know. I mean, more and more when you find these things, you find like, look, they knew, somebody knew, something was out there. They tweeted, they wrote something on social media. Is this me saying you can catch everything? No, but you'll miss every single ball that you don't take a swing at.
Right. So in this case, you'll miss you're going to have, you're basically putting your net out there. Right? This is a little bit of a different analogy, but you're putting your net out there, and you might not get everything, but you're going to get some smaller bites and fish that'll lead to bigger bites and fish, and it'll tell you how big or narrow your net needs to be depending on the conditions. So I think that becomes, really, really important, and of course, with the benefit of hindsight,
Yeah.
everything comes clear, right? But that's not realistic or fair. It's
Yeah,
a little bit different if you got 200 people or you got one guy trying to execute a solo practitioner with protective intelligence trying to do all the things. It doesn't make sense. And I think something that can really kind of a visual that can bring it home to everybody is the solo practitioner who gets attacked. Do you cover and evacuate, or do you separate yourself from your principal and then deal with the threat? And most people go, I got to stay with my principal. I have to protect him. Well,
maybe
that's a choice, right? Or you could say, run. And that way they can be part of their survival while you're dealing with the known threats. And everybody goes, well, you don't know what's unknown. Well, I know what this other dudes or 6 dudes are wearing me out. So maybe I'm going to pay attention to that.
Yeah. I think about, I go back to my military and think about things like MET-TC or situation dictates. To say that I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, you don't know. I mean, but you have to have enough knowledge, and you have to have enough, go back to the risk assessment, to kind of understand the situation. So you can say, when you have to make that call in the moment, you feel like you're making the best one. You don't have to stop there and think like, oh, I'm getting hit in the face, I'll run with my principal. Or do I engage this person? Like you said, tell the boss to run. That's like the equivalent of what's the sound of one hand clapping,
Pretty much.
But those are things you got to think about. So this is another thing that we definitely continue to watch. I mean, it's also, there's a bit of the church in here because this church definitely is controversial. And I would think if I was doing a risk assessment, I'm not playing hindsight on this one, but if I was doing a risk assessment and you saw this name come up in conjunction with a principal, that would definitely be something that I would start monitoring around. Again, it's not for us to judge. It's not for us to make any type of political calls on anyone. It's just for us to understand what controversy is out there and how do we monitor against it.
Right. Well, and I think the other piece is that, it in this case and how you used it, right, is again, if you're looking for a smoking gun, you're rarely going to find it, right? And usually that's in the moment and you're on the back foot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to do this. I'm ready. I'm going to go get it on, right? Or whatever the case is, right? So but these, you have to look at them collectively, like, mark my words, revenge,
Mm-hmm.
and then they ruin my family. I wish I had a weapon, or how much I want one, or whatever the case is. None of those are threats. It's threatening, right?
Right.
But you still, that should at least make your radar. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not saying
it's like our good buddy Brian Flannery says, aggression versus violence.
Yes.
You're driving down the highway. I'm going to kill you because some guy cut you off. Are you gonna? Probably not. You're making a statement. Violence of action.
Right.
So that's a good one. Something we'll continue to watch. Something else I thought just of interest is like when they started looking at people in the like in the government that had ties or had given money to the church, they found that nearly half the party's lawmakers had some kind of contact with the church. I mean, interesting. Again, that's not us making a judgment call on anything. It's just like these are interesting. These are interesting things that would need to they would get a question mark, and then we need some type of answer around it. What does this mean for us as protectors?
Right. Well, I think the big thing in all of that is, or at least what it says to me, is just the sheer volume of data, right, that comes in. And so once you know where to look, that's the easy part, right? But if you don't know where to look you're just getting all of this in this gigantic net, you've got to pare it out. Once an incident happens, everybody goes, oh, well, why don't we look in that direction? That's super helpful.
Think about it. In June, they had probably no idea how that nearly half of people in Parliament were involved with the church.
Exactly.
But in October, they probably have it down to the exact number and how much people gave.
And the
Now, I
minute
think
they
again,
did it,
yeah, and again, I'm not, we're not cops and protectors aren't police. We just want to know, like, does this create an anomaly, and does this an anomaly create a risk, and does the risk have a mitigation strategy around it?
that's it.
And sometimes the easy one is just monitor, which means you actually have to do it. And that was a discussion I was having with some folks the other day about, hey, I dedicate 2 hours to monitoring every week to this. Well, you're dedicating 2 hours in a moment of something. So make sure that,
Right. It's a snapshot, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's it. So, and I think that can't be stated is that getting a snapshot is completely different than watching the video.
getting
Right?
a snapshot is this.
Yep.
Yep. Seems okay.
Yep. Yeah. So I was listening to a podcast by, it's called the Legends of the 75th, and it's clearly it's a Ranger one.
I heard it leads the way.
It fucking it does, motherfucker.
Indeed. Okay.
Anyway,
Psychology.
so a lot of it talks about the transition. The one I was listening to was talking about the transition of the Ranger Regiment from what it used to be to what it needed to be, and as the leadership recognized the need for a sustainable fight and what that looked like, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a guy who was his name's Craig Nixon, who was the commander of the Ranger Regiment, and then he made a single star, and I think it was like DCG for 25th ID or something. Anyways, phenomenal tactician and strategist, and what he was talking about was, what is it that we need to, what are we doing now, and what do we need to become? And then he would go, well, and as he's looking at that, he realizes that people are that they're trying to give lessons learned from the past. Like, here's what you're going to find. Here's what you're going to execute. Here's what that is. And he was like, I was just there, and none of this is relevant because the pace of the wars at the time, was outpacing those TTPs. Like, you miss 90 days, you're gone for 90 days, and the TTPs have changed completely, or tactics, techniques, and procedures. So again, it goes talk back to that snapshot versus the video. And the snapshot's helpful, but that's a conditional, right? It's not
Right.
foundational, right? So again, I hope hopefully that people understand that analogy is that snapshot, you've got 2 hours a week is better than nothing, but
For sure.
you've got to look at collectively what you're getting and then connect the dots between those, because that's going to change rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, I've told folks in the past, like, great, just don't arbitrarily say, cool, give me 2 hours. Be thoughtful. Look, fine, if your resources or whatever is only 2 hours, maybe it's your own personal resources, maybe it's an organizational resource, maybe it's just time. Make sure that, like, let's be directive about what we're looking for in that 2 hours so we can make the most of it and not just say, hey, we surfed around a little bit, didn't find anything. But I do agree, though, 2 hours is better than nothing, because 2 hours might get you something there. You go, hey, we probably need to check this out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another one I think that we'll continue to watch, Chris, and see. I'm also, curious. I know we've got our feelers out to see when, and I haven't seen any type of probe they did into the police and the protective work from it. Again, we likely may not see it, but if it does, I hope that we get a chance to review it. I saw this, and you and I kind of talked about it before we turned the mics on, but Justice Alito said this last Tuesday that he thought the leak of the draft opinion to overturn Roe v. Wade basically put a huge target on the Supreme Court justices' back, making them, quote, targets for assassination, end quote, talking about your insider threat that you mentioned earlier.
Right. Yeah. And so this is a great example of what we talked about from a protective intelligence standpoint, right? And you're looking at the environment in its totality. If you remember, what this kind of takes me back to what people were leaking, when the Trump administration was in place, right? Like, what organizations were leaking, what individuals inside the federal government were leaking, right? Because of how they felt, what they felt, and what those leaks could impact, or how those leaks could impact essentially the safety of those people who are protected, you know? And
Yeah.
so I think in this case, yeah, he's like, hey, here's the deal. Like, this is going to be an emotional response to everybody. What is
Yep.
that? Where is that emotional response a tipping point for people, not only with this, but the layered threats, the layered stressors that people are feeling, right? So
Yep.
if you care about that decision, you know, and it drives an emotional response, and you're stressed out, or somebody just cut you off in traffic, and then suddenly you hear that, you know, suddenly you might have just, you know, gained a mission. So I think, you know, what that does for us is it helps us to maintain a calendar-based approach to risk assessments, right? I mean,
Yeah.
excuse me, to protective operations, to say, hey, this is going to be released. We should probably ramp up our protective operations a little bit, just in case there are any leaks, so we're ahead of the game instead of on the back foot.
Well, I think this is a good one to save, because whenever somebody tells me insider threats is a cyber issue, I just like to hold this up in front of them and say, no, it's not. It's an all issue. So if you're a protector, you're managing a program, you're a security leader, and you're not including the protective folks, or the, you know, protective intel, protective risk, whatever, in the conversation, wait for it, you're wrong. Full stop.
Right.
Wrong. Because he says the leak, Alito said, the leak also made those of us who were thought to be in the majority in support of overruling Roe and Casey targets for assassination, because it gave people a rational reason to think they could prevent that from happening by killing one of us. Now, what we're talking about here is, you know, you and I love the term, or at least I know I do, of like intel driven, ops led, threat informed. This is threat informed, because we know the environment is one that we're now demonizing the opposing ideas, and that brings an existential threat. Like you like to say, tastes great, less filling. Well, if your tastes great and you're less filling, I hate you, and now it's an existential threat. And we've got a leaked document that says Chris says he's going to come out on the, you know, the less filling side. And like, you're right, something happens and it just clicks in your brain. You're like, I'm gonna go take care of that mofo. It's done. It's over.
Right. Right. And that's it. It's like either you feel like you can prevent it, or you're going to retaliate, right? And so
Yep.
as we take a look at this, you say, all right, well, who's, you know, where are we? What are our known POIs that may have a response to this?
Yeah.
And then more importantly, what are the unknowns? You know?
Exactly. Well, I think, you know, I rewind like 45 seconds to something you just said, which I think is important, which is the minute, and I'm sure, look, I know some folks from, you know, from these teams, and I'm sure somebody had this thought, but you know, if let's just put this in a corporation or organizational view, something comes out, you see it, automatic response should be, how does this affect our protective posture? Well, PR didn't tell us, marketing didn't tell us, don't care. You can figure that out later. And that gives you a good opportunity to set up a one-on-one with that PR person, that marketing person once a month, and just, I don't have anything to talk to them. Well, what's coming up? What do we need to think about? But I think the idea, as soon as this was leaked, like there should be assumption, can bad things happen from this? What bad things would those be? What do we need to do? What do we have to do those things? And how, and at that point, how should we increase? We should review that risk assessment as you talked about early on, and then what do we need to do to monitor around this?
Yeah. And you know, again, as we talk about this, what happens is that those singular protective operations or whatever suddenly have a little bit more context and threat surrounding them, right? At least from my perspective, right? Because like, look, if your principal's meeting a chief justice that day, you know, or prior to the leak, how does that impact you? You know, you're like,
yeah, well,
whatever.
I mean, there's been times that we've in the past with details I've been on where we've called meetings off because something just happened, and we're like, we probably don't need to be attached to this. He said something else here, Chris, that I thought was interesting to bring out. Alito said, it was a great betrayal of trust by somebody, and it was a shock because nothing like that had happened in the past. So it certainly changed the atmosphere at the court for the remainder of the last term. Like nothing, like this never happens here, but it, but it does.
Again, that is the point, right? Is where people go, well, Japan is like one of the safest places on the planet. It is.
So it's not.
Right up until it's not. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it makes a great point too, is that you talked about the marketing team or whomever, right? I mean, it is incumbent upon you to educate them as to why. Like, well, we don't do, like a great example would be like, well, it's just a customer meeting. Yes, our customer, whomever has just either earned or lost, 50% market share, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a great example would be Musk taking over Twitter, right? Like, so we're going to meet with the customer. Our customer is Twitter. Okay, could that be, high risk for you? Or we're going to meet with Tesla.
Are there unintended consequences that we should consider? And even if they tell you still need to bring it up. And I think, Chris, something to think about, especially if you're on the corporate side. We've talked about the 10K on the show before. We're huge fans of reviewing your 10K, and I'm excited that the SEC is actually coming out with formatting rules for the 10K, so they're actually all will be readable. Many corporate 10Ks have brand risk as one of their top risks.
Yep.
So again, when you're going to go talk to these folks, instead of saying you got to watch out for the assassins and all, you can say, look, brand risk is one of our key risks. If something happens here, this is going to affect the brand. The brand's going to affect the financial stability of the company, et cetera, et cetera. And this is, look, I know people are going like, Chuck, we're in the protection business. It's a human business. Well, you also have to be able to speak to it in the business sense, so you can go to them and say, look, now let's talk. Now that we've said that, let's talk about some mitigating factors that will protect individuals, their staff, and the people here. But let's be clear, we're pinning this to a 10K risk.
Well, let's look at it like this. What is the impact on your brand if your principal gets, thrashed because you have a known EP team that is supposed to be with them, and you disregarded it because it was just a customer meeting and you didn't look full scope at what the risks were?
Yeah. And again, I mean, you look at something like, look, they didn't really want security there. Well, talk to somebody, figure out other ways. What are the options? Could it be something that was more of a low key? Many things. I think our point here is like, I heard a CSO say this earlier this year, like, don't let a disaster go unused. Take a moment to increase your internal network and then keep it going. Let's have coffee once a month and for a half an hour and just see like what's on your calendar, what's on mine, and let's just talk.
My thought process is always like, it's not marketing's job to determine whether you need to be there or not. It's yours. So freaking, you need to make sure.
Well,
you need to make sure what that looks like as well. Cool. We won't be there, but we're going to be.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Marketing said we don't need to be there. We got the day off. We'll see you tomorrow. No, you're going to. It's about safety layers. Put no safety nets in place.
If you give your power, your protective power to somebody else, and you're giving it to them, and then you're at that point you're just becoming a luggage handler. And this is not me saying I don't do luggage. Well, everyone has at some point. I'm merely stating that the decision about risk and the decision about protective blankets, if you will, is one that's on the protector. Now, they could get vetoed by the boss, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, I mean, the injects, if you will, or the inputs and the mitigation strategies need to come from the protector. And if you give it away, then you give it away once, you're giving it away again and again and again, because it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, and you will. Well, my experience, never is a strong word, but you'll never get it back. It is a freaking heavy lift to get that back.
And you see folks do it time and time again because like, oh, well, I need to make so-and-so happy. And I get it, but there's ways and there's strategies to do that so that you can still have your voice and then say, look, I got it. You're here. I'm here. Let's figure out a happy medium. And it also forces us as protectors to have courses of action. Like, it can't be like the only option is 5 people on Chris when he's in, when he's going to Berlin. Well, that's not, at some point maybe that becomes unacceptable for some reason. So, okay, we're going to have 2 people on Chris and 1 person, in protective surveillance or something.
Right.
I don't know, but I think our point is like, look, don't give it away. Be proactive and reach out and develop those internal networks to have conversations around stuff like this. Because, like you said, and also the insider threat piece. I mean, like you said, this has never happened there before.
Yes.
And you find more and more people are feeling emboldened to give out information. And there might be people that looked at this leak and said that was the greatest thing ever. But as protectors, it's not our job to get our politics involved. It's our job to be risk mitigators. So when I look at stuff like this, it's frightening that someone felt that it was okay to leak that.
I know. But that's the point, right? Is that people are now allowing those personal, emotional decisions to compromise, or moral, whatever they believe their moral high ground is, to compromise, people's safety. Or maybe they just are so incensed that they don't actually look at that. It might compromise somebody's safety.
They probably don't think about it. Like, I've heard people say before about former President Trump, like, I wish that guy would die. I mean, that's a strong word to say about a former president. Wherever you stand on the political side. I mean, saying those types of things publicly, that creates an issue. But again, I go back to aggression versus actual violence. Speaking of actual violence, Chris, I just can't believe I did that segue. That was a good one.
That was good.
Over in your great state of California, Nancy Pelosi's husband was violently assaulted in their home today. Or I think, was it today or
I think
last
it was like
night?
Last night.
Yeah. Apparently he's fine and he's going to recover, but apparently somebody broke into the house and started shouting, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" I immediately started thinking about what was in '86 when the journalist Dan Rather got beaten up and the guy was like, "Kenneth, what's the frequency?"
Yep.
But
well, who I thought about home invasion was Donna Miles, right? Just our recent guest, But but again, so it was that, and then the other piece was like, Nancy's husband at 82, he's kind of making the headlines a lot lately.
Yeah.
Anyways,
but this is where we are now. I mean, these are unprecedented times. This is like the 2nd or 3rd time that her home in San Francisco has been under fire. I mean, either with protesters, graffiti, and now someone brazenly broke in. I'm sure Capitol Police, I'm sure the protective unit at Capitol Police is beside themselves right now. But and we're right on the, we just finished up something on the midterm elections and put it out, but here's where we are. Midterm elections is literally right around the corner.
Right.
And it's, as you say, it's going to be sporty.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as we've discussed, right, where because of COVID and decisions made surrounding COVID, we're seeing like literal threats against, lower level officials, school boards and things like that, where you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But like, where people are like, I'm going to come down and I'm going to do all of these bad things to your kids, right?
Yep.
Which is a direct threat. I'm going to do that, right? Versus somebody should, or I can't wait for you to die, or whatever, right? All those things, all the actual violence piece. So if it's happening there, right, it's fairly easy to make that association and climb that ladder. And I think it's probably causing a lot of gray hair and sleepless nights for government assigned protectors, both on residential details and on mobile details. And what I found was interesting is in the article I read was the Capitol Police Annex, or those officers that were assigned to that, arrived, or a field office in San Francisco. And it was funny. It never really dawned on me. I'm like, why would the Capitol Police have have a field office? Well, because they're responsible for the security of those
Mm-hmm.
folks, you know. So, you know, interestingly, if I saw a dude with a Capitol Police jacket show up, I would find that to be highly suspect myself. But now I've connected that dot. I think I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So you can teach an old dog new tricks, apparently.
Well, and it also, I go back to, as we're getting to midterms and, you know, we have the January 6th trials and activities going on. I mean, again, what is your boss openly stated that she's, you know, right or left or center, or as your organization have something that's out there? You know, we live in a time now where a lot of consumers and a lot of employees want the corporation to have a stance. So you're going to piss somebody off because you're not, you know, at least a quarter of the people in your organization are going to be for the opposing side. So it behooves you, if you haven't done this already, to look at your organization. Where do we fit in the political spectrum? This is not Chris and Chuck making a political statement. It's us saying, go back to risk assessment. Where do we sit in here? Is there anything controversial? Did my boss do some OSINT work? Did my boss give any money to the right or the left or the red or the blue or the green or the purple or whatever?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What do we need to know about? And do we have a plan if somebody shows up at their house or something? What, you know, let's dust these plans off.
I think it's interesting that a lot of people have extremely black and white viewpoints when it comes to politics, right? Because you know, you see people that are disparaged for just donations to both parties, and you don't, people just look at it at face value and like, oh my God, you donated X to this party and Y to that party, and you know, you're a traitor. Well, it's not it shouldn't necessarily be about party. It should be what they're saying, what the candidate is saying, and then what is your relationship with that candidate that you know, and what are you doing to secure your, you know, your business, your future, your own hopes, dreams, and strategies. You know, like that's what the politics piece is about. And I think we've kind of forgotten about that. You know, it doesn't have to be party lines. It should be, you know, what the candidate represents. But you know, people get wound up about that, and that could be a threat. You know.
Well, I think look, I love America because the system is made to create discussion and discourse and drive that. And I think I have all confidence that will remain that way. But, you know, given COVID and other things that have happened, I think we're at a point now where, again, you know, we've demonized. The worst thing you can be is in the center.
Right.
And I think as a result, people have somewhat forgotten. Of course, these are my own comments. I think people have forgotten a little bit about the ideas of critical thinking. You know, let's have a discussion. Let's see what the other side says. I can make a decision. But, you know, especially as protectors, I mean, critical thinking is so vitally important to what we do.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, it goes back to all of the stressors, right, that we talk about. And I think that, you know, at some point people feel like they can't have a discussion because they're being talked over or talked through or talked around. And I think that's what causes the frustration. So,
well,
you know, we exchanged COVID for a recession, right?
What do we learn in the military, Chris? Push to talk, release to think.
Well, there's that, right? You know, and everybody wants to be heard. You know, they don't want to listen, you know. So
yeah,
when you combine all of that, those internal and external stressors, they get to be quite challenging. And I think the other thing that has an impact on it is all the filters, right? Before, if you were to make a threat, you'd have to write a letter, or you know, or you could call on the phone. But now you've got, you know, 4,000 social media or you know, digital, you know, avenues to tell somebody to fuck off, or you're gonna freaking, you know, tear their head off, or whatever it is you want to do. And it's just the, you know, the data overload and data is overwhelming.
Yeah, and you have to pay attention to, you know, you have to pay attention to what your client is saying. You have to pay attention to what their satellite folks are saying. I mean, you know, stars will make a comment, and you know, it's a sporty environment. I don't mean that tongue in cheek. And as protectors and folks that are in the risk intelligence field, you know, we have to stay on top of the monitoring and understanding like what is out there so that we can have that threat-informed environment. So as intel, we can get it, and then ops can say, okay, how do we action this and come up with some strategies?
Right. And I think if we realign, not necessarily reorder, but realign and prioritize, look, if your pitch to your principal or your client, if you will, is I save you from assassination and kidnapping, those aren't really big on anybody's list, right? But if you
Yeah.
look at all of the other actions and activities, the brand protection piece, which is probably the most significant out of all of that, which leads into the embarrassment, harassment piece, the other things, then you're actually providing business value, and I can also provide prevent you from being kidnapped and assassinated, right? So I think if we just kind of reorder how we think about that, not necessarily reprioritize it, but how we think about it in terms of delivering value, suddenly you're able to make business cases a lot better,
Yep, I agree. Speaking of assassination, I saw that the New York
Dude,
Post.
you're on fire with the
I know, man.
segues,
It's
you're
the
making it
Protector's
happen.
Blend. Protector's Blend is doing it for me today. New York Post got hacked, and someone took over. It was an internal employee, but took over their Twitter feed and started calling for the assassination of President Biden, along with some others, I think to include a New York lawmaker, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Of course, they've gone in, they figured it out, they fired the person, they've taken all the tweets down. But again, I go back to this idea of insider threat now inciting a call for violence.
Right.
Did that person, and I'll be curious to follow this, Chris, and understand, like, why the hell would you do that? Were you trying to incite violence, or you're just trying to be funny, or were you, what was the reasoning behind that? But, what do you do if you wake up and you say, like, oh, the New York Post told me to go assassinate Joe Biden? Okay. I love the Post.
Yeah,
Here
you're just
go.
you're waiting for a sign, and suddenly you get it, and then now you're committed, it's just, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I wonder if the president will make it to the end of the day, just based not from a threat perspective, just from a health perspective, like I'm like, did he make it? But the inciting piece is significant, and that would be the same for any president, right? Or really anyone, right? If when you're you're pushing to this significant population and telling them to do this, it's pretty.
Yeah, in fact, I'm
it's
just
like
gonna see
yelling fire in a movie theater.
Exactly what I was just thinking. Like, this is the equivalent of yelling fire in a movie theater. So I want to. Gosh, there's been an update to it. So okay. Let me just read this to you from the Independent. Similar fake tweets that went live on Thursday included other politicians on both sides of the aisle, either as a source or targets of threat. They included disturbing posts threatening the lives of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, accusing Texas Governor Greg Abbott of advocating lethal force at the border, and a fake threat against Josh Gottheimer and family of Republican opponent Frank Pallotta. The blah, 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 blah. New York Times says they're investigating it. Of course, in New York Post said it was reprehensible. But I'm curious again to follow this and understand, like, if it was indeed turns out to be as I think New York Post is calling a quote rogue employee, what made them rogue, and how did they get access? This is an insider. This is definitely an insider threat, one that I think any corporation should look at in terms of, why did they get hacked? How did they get taken over? Who was monitoring to make sure? How long were these things up before somebody said, well, crap, somebody did a spit take probably this morning, was like, what the hell?
Right. But again, it goes back to this, like we've talked about before, is like misinformation, disinformation. Everybody gets, you get the information immediately. You see that tweet, and then suddenly your people are on the phone, damning it and all and suddenly it's this gigantic, knee-jerk reaction. It's almost similar to what we've seen, stand by, as we had this increase in bomb threat hoaxes, right? An
Yeah.
increase in swatting that we've been seeing in schools, right? Calling out active shooters. It's like it incites a response, and not positive and not
So
helpful.
it looks like there was an update around lunchtime, and they said the Post said the employee had been terminated. Now, I'm also curious, like, will there be criminal charges? Because, like
Yeah.
you say, like yelling fire in a movie theater. I mean, you're basically calling for the assassination and
Of a sitting
vilifying
president.
things. Yeah, I
And
mean,
a
don't care
freaking
don't care where you are politically. The president's the president.
right.
You know, so I don't know. That definitely to me was very curious. And again, it goes back to my thing that the protector or the physical security risk person, if you're the everything for your company, needs to have a seat at the table for the insider threat group.
Right.
Full stop. I mean, it's these days of like it's digital or it's not. Those are over. They need, if you don't trust your physical guy or physical girl, at least let her in the room so that they can hear what's going on, because he's going to have to go back and make some comments or make some adjustments based on what you do. You can't work in a silo, gang. You just can't.
Yeah, and well, you can, but you're going to get pounded. And here's the
Yeah.
problem: is that if you're trying to work in a silo in a corporation and somebody gets hurt, you've just significantly increased the liability for you and your organization,
Yep.
which is not awesome, right? Because, well, yeah, we knew it, but I decided not to tell anybody about it because, whatever reason, or I decided not to bring it to the attention of the people who could deal with it, whatever reason, and not helpful, right? So there you have it.
Yeah. Well, let's take a couple of minutes, Chris, and talk about the conference, since the agenda is out, or at least the agenda is put together. I think some of the marketing stuff will be released this weekend. But since you're kind of, the guy, I appreciate all the hard work you've done for that, because having done it for so many years myself, give us a taste of what's coming up on the conference.
Well, first off, it's going to be awesome. That was a good dramatic pause, right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. No. So it is going to be awesome. I think we've done some things that first off, your registration and getting your badge is automated, right? So you'll go up to these
Woohoo!
little kiosks and it'll print out your badge or have your badge for you, and it'll be, super ninja legit. We also have a interactive app so that you can communicate, and send questions to back and forth with the presenters. And then we can also do, I think, what do you call it? Attendee to attendee, which is awesome. We have some great sponsors and a ton of vendors that are helping out.
Oh my God. I mean, we had to increase the vendor area, or
Correct.
vendor alley, or whatever we're calling it.
Right.
Because so many people are coming. And when, of course, we've got Crisis 24 as our premier sponsor, and we're very grateful for that. And we've people stepping up to help. I mean, Alan Perry and company coming out to say, hey, we're going to provide, some cameras so people can get headshots. I've had actually a lot of people reach out over the last few months and ask about that, because what a great service.
Let's just so Alan will probably, as soon as he hears this, call me and be like, what are you doing?
Don't do it.
But also I don't care. Because I think it needs to be called out, is that his company's a sponsor, right? Okay, cool. But behind the scenes, they also are doing the camera piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not only are they doing headshots, but they have a photographer that's going to go around and take photos of us at the mixers and during the day, so we can rotate and post those up and use them on social. And then he's also sponsoring the the shoot, which is not necessarily associated with the IPSB.
It's just part of the
part of the
Protectors
EP
Week
week,
stuff going on.
right? Yeah.
Or EP Week, sorry.
Yeah, EP week. And then he's also a diamond sponsor, for the overall conference. So, very humble, right? And it gets a shout out because it's a sponsor, et cetera. But I just really wanted to call out the other things that he's doing within
He's always there.
Yes, I agree.
He's always there and he's always willing. But I think of there's so many, everyone's quick to judge. And then there are those that just quietly stand up and say, what can we do to make it better? What can we do to push it forward? And he definitely is one of those folks. So
right.
I've always appreciated can we say the quiet support that Alan and company has always given to the conference and the IPSB?
Yes, I think we can, but or the no longer quiet support, really.
Yeah,
because I think it's important, right? I think it's important, for people to understand that. And then, of course, we want to thank, we've got the title sponsor, Crest 24, like you talked about, and then we have, diamond sponsors. Go ahead.
Oh my God, yeah.
The diamond sponsors of Allied Universal, Veterans Covert Protection Group, Torchstone Global. And here's the funny thing is, I don't know how we made these up, but I'm glad we don't have Emerald, because it would make me feel like I'm promoting like an Amway freaking
the
thing.
Emerald Isle of,
like the Emerald
pick
level.
Your car.
Ruby, yeah, exactly. Freaking just not a pyramid scheme, folks, not a pyramid scheme. So those are our diamond sponsors, and there have been some folks that have been sponsored, different things like. Scope now is sponsoring one of the mixers. I think that's I believe that's the second night. RMS is sponsoring event security, which is pretty cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, we should have security, right? So that's kind of cool.
We normally do, but it's cool that they stepped up and said, "Hey, let us do this, full send as a sponsorship opportunity." So really cool.
Right, and then we'll get
to the gold sponsors. I hope you're licensed in Vegas.
Yes, that would be helpful. Then we got the gold sponsors, which are, fantastic. Honor Group, obviously, with, Mac. Let's see, who do we have here? Oh, Concentric, doing great things there. 360 Privacy, Ardwolf, Control Risk. So, I mean, I think it's just incredible, all of the folks that are jumping in on this whole thing. Strategic Threat Protection is a gold sponsor. So it's just fantastic, all the people that are jumping in. And we will get to the bronze and the silver bronze sponsors as well on a future podcast. But, just people doing great things for the industry to be involved and to be here. So it's greatly appreciated. The other piece is that I think I gotta thank you and your sweet art skills when we pushed out, I think one of our first, or at least the first one I can remember, our first speaker flyer. So are we adulting at the Close Protection Conference?
We are adulting.
Yeah,
we are adulting. Only took 5 years.
Hey.
But yeah, I know we say this over and over again, but this is an all volunteer organization. People ask I want to be on the board. I want to do this. It's not really, the board is just the board is just a ratification vehicle. I mean, you want to be involved. If you want to be involved, you can. Yes. You can raise your hand and say, "Hey, look, I want to be on that lessons learned committee and do this. Hey, I want to be on the upcoming, webinar committee. I want to be on the training committee. I want to, it's not always about just being on the board, because the board functions as a board. They ratify, what the executive steering committee does, but there's so many ways to be involved and just step up.
Exactly.
And that's our goal too. It's one of the goals of the IPSB is to say, hey, look, we have a vehicle by which you can dip your toe in the water and say, is this for me? And do I want to step up into the limelight, so to speak? Do I want to get involved? Do I want to write something? And it's a good place to go, and go to somebody like Chris Story or a Patrick Kane or somebody and say, hey, could we co-author a LinkedIn piece, or could we,
Right.
because everyone wants to have their voice heard, and in a positive, in a good way, but
Right.
this is a way to do it.
Yeah. And so I think the other piece is that we just kind of talked around all of that, just kind of some of the new things that we're doing, but we're going to hear from the IPSB president, Chuck Randolph. I don't know if you heard of that guy. And then
Dude owes me money.
Wait a minute, do you?
What's the frequency, Randolph?
And then we're going to be our keynote this year is Gabrielle Thompson,
Be awesome.
GDVA Threat Assessment, Vice President of Threat Assessment. It's going to be fantastic. Bill Peeler is going to run a reverse mentoring panel, which I think will be awesome. We've got international presenters from Israel and Ivor Tarrant, Mexico and Pablo Ortiz Monasterio, the UK / by way of South Africa of Janina Linka, Christian Zerkowitz from, I think, Belgium.
Yep.
So I mean, it's a pretty fantastic lineup. And then of course we've got, once again, we've got Craig McKim and Kat Bender doing their networking and personal branding segment, just prior to the event itself. So that's cool. And then last but not least, the angry Conway Twitty will not be on stage as much, who will be replaced by a much more bubbly and smiling face, which would be helpful. So we got that going for us.
Well, I look forward to Natasha being part of it, and it's exciting to have the changes like this too, where now as the board we can be more of the board and be running and doing and working on some of these initiatives. It's going to be awesome. And the Corporate Executive Protection Leadership Council, the group of EP leaders and managers in the corporations, they've decided to start having one of their 2 meetings a year during Vegas. So I mean, it really is EP week.
Yeah, it's awesome. Or as I like to call it, the EP Skull and Bones Secret Society.
Well, and there's so many things happening during EP week, and I think there's some stuff even happening after the conference too, in terms of some training opportunities people are putting on, and it's awesome, and it's great. I can't wait. I mean, did you book your room?
I did. I did not book it at the Westgate because that was sold out.
Sold out. So if you haven't booked, get on it. And there's been stuff popping up on LinkedIn about.
So the Westgate was sold out in terms of the
room rate,
the room block that we got, right? So then I looked at the Westgate actual prices and I was like, negative Ghost Rider, that pattern is full. I will move on.
I think it's because the rodeos in town, I think. Yep. Well, we're back to events. The rodeos in town, I think Amazon's big event is either gearing up or will have just geared down. So there might be some loadout activity. I mean, again, we're back to it. So right. It's exciting.
Yeah. Well, so anyways, it's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Awesome and exhausting, but still awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're going to try to figure out how to do some recording while we're there and grab some people and do some live stuff. So that will be cool. I look forward to that.
You shut your pirate whore mouth. We are not trying to do that.
Oh no, it's going to happen.
It's horrible. That sounds horrible.
Okay, well, I think that does it for this month's episode of Shop Talk. I know we've been super busy, but any Clubhouse notes to put out while we're there?
So we've been having some pretty good Clubhouse conversations, and got a kudo from our friend from Texas, George Behan, who's actually from Dublin, Ireland, but we just, that's an ongoing thing. But he said it's one of the best rooms with the best content regarding executive protection that he's seen. So that's kind of a little feather in the cap,
Yeah, we and it continues to be strategic, or a little bit deeper dive into some of the subjects we talk about here. So I mean, it's a good I'm not sure, it's a good addition to all the things that we have going on, trying to help and promote the industry. But I guess, my friend, I wouldn't have it any other way.
No, I agree. Yeah, we're freaking busy, dude. Which is, I guess is cool, but damn it, man.
Yeah, I know. Thank God it's Friday, my friend. Thank God it's Friday.
Exactly.
All right. This has been Conversations in Close Protection, October Shop Talk. My name is Chuck Randolph. And of course, across that digital divide is the fount of security himself, Mr. Chris Story. Wash your hands, watch your six, and keep your head down.
Good times.
You've been listening to an episode of Conversations in Close Protection. Email us at protectiontalk@outlook.com and find us on your preferred podcast platform. Please take a moment and consider rating us to help others find Conversations in Close Protection too. Look for us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and other social media spots. Conversations in Close Protection is brought to you by your hosts Chuck Randolph and Chris Story. Our engineering editor is the mighty Aaron Peck. Please remember that all opinions expressed do not represent those of any organizations or companies the hosts are affiliated with. This is Rachel saying watch your six and keep your heads down.